Japan's taking almost opposite approach from Germany when it comes to history education. And many people, including the government, don't seem to really acknowledge the war crimes much. But with the growing number of foreign residents, recently there's been a debate whether or not we should teach kids the history as much as Germany does. Based on the survey I checked though, it might be quite divided. And I see some people worry that it could damage our patriotism or faith towards our own nation, especially knowing that some people in Germany might be feeling too much guilt and constantly apologize to other nations. And as you know, there's so-called white guilt in the States. I'm sure some people in Japan don't want to see that happen here.
日本人なんだっていう、そこに誇りを持てないと、日本は悪い戦争をしたと、空国主義だったんだと、日本人として誇り持てるような教育を受けてきたかって話ですよ。特に小さい子たちには光の部分から教えましょうよ。ね。
I also see some people claim our tax money shouldn't be used for it, as we increasingly struggle with public finance, while the private sector might gonna grow a lot. Leave it to private sector though, it could cause even bigger ignorance, and other nations wouldn't be happy about that. But many Japanese people I know argue that history is written by winners, which means could be heavily biased against Japan, and maybe that's why some people don't wanna keep it mandatory, and they criticize other nations. As you know, there's no international standard for history education. So each country teach history differently and biased for own nation. And for example, I see many Japanese people unhappy about how the US teach it.
アメリカがですね、原爆を投下したというのは、これはもう何のですね、情状酌量の余地もない。日本はそれでも戦争を継続しようとした。仕方なく断腸の思いで2発目を落とした。そんなもん全くの嘘で、トルマン大統領はですね、2発の原爆の投下を一度に命令してるんですね。アメリカので使われている教科書を散々読んだんですけども、どこにもですね、そういうことは書いていない。
But Japan's in dilemma in a sense that, like I said, we have a growing number of foreign residents, and relation with other Asian countries needs to improve. We can't ignore the pressure from them. Anyway, with the arguments I just mentioned in mind, what do residents in Japan actually think about it? I wonder how they're gonna react to the question and response. What do they think needs to be done for Japan? Let's go find out, and let me know your thoughts on that after hearing their opinions. Hope you enjoy.
I think it's a sensitive topic, and teaching that would kind of change the perspective of Japan. People may be like hurt or vulnerable.
I definitely think they should teach about the war crimes. Well, I should learn more. I think that's one of the most important part of education. You have to learn about humanity in order to progress in history.
Some people worry that maybe that's gonna make kids dislike Japan.
Well, if they dislike Japan because of the truth, they should dislike Japan.
なんか知らないとそもそも話すこともできないし、解決することもできないと思うので、やっぱまず知識を持つことが大事だと思います。神聖化するよりはちゃんと現実と向き合って、その上でもやっぱり日本が好きだなってなった方がいいと思います。
Yes, I do think that although it's a difficult topic, very important to know exactly the crimes your country has committed in order to prevent those in the future, but also to be educated so that when you're speaking to people of other countries, you aren't ignorant about that.
You're supposed to know what happens in your country, and if you don't, like, if people from other countries know what happened in yours, like, how are you going to argue with them? What happened if you don't know?
People, like, those people even get mad about how we are so, like, ignorant or don't even know about that. But I also want to ask, United States, like, did you learn enough about what happened in Hiroshima? People coming from the US to Hiroshima, like, they get surprised, right? Because they don't learn about it. They don't learn about their own crime.
There's definitely going to have to be, I guess, emotional reckoning with that. I guess I can sort of empathize with Japan wanting to sort of hide that period of time, especially because today, a lot of the people who did those terrible things in the past, they're dead now.
I think children should be taught history. The rest of the world knows what has happened, and not like we can hide that. Teaching history for children, of course we could also censor that so it's not too harmful for their like psychological well-being, but as truthfully as possible, I think will be great.
As a Filipino, how would you feel like,
Japanese people not knowing about the past?
Yeah.
I'm totally fine with that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Because like the past is in the past. Japanese people nowadays, they welcome us. Just tell them, not teach them. Like Japan used to take over the Philippines. I also don't want to force the children. I don't want them to think that, oh, maybe we should give respect to the Philippines. No, I don't want that. We don't care about the past. I think it will be better if we just let pass the past.
You have to be careful with how you learn it or how you teach kids about it, because if the kid starts hating Japan for that, then the country is not going to grow. But we should definitely learn about it too, because what I notice also among Japanese people, including myself though, when someone says something about Japan like badly, they kind of get mad. Without them knowing, they love Japan. They also have like so much ego and pride. It doesn't just speak loud, but when it gets triggered, it speaks loud. Learning about a little bit of war crimes in a careful way make people more open-minded in a way.
I do think there is a risk of like losing some of that nationalism, patriotism, when you inform your students that your country has committed crimes in the past. But I also think ultimately it's much better to do so. I hope that when they grow up, they can realize I love my country even more for that reason, you know, because they were honest with me and they wanted me to be fully informed.
For example, in America, there's the topic of slavery. It's very much covered very deeply, but I don't think Americans hate themselves. White guilt does exist, but I don't think it's very much prevalent. I mean, either way, I think it's much more important for people to learn about their history and still run the risk of their people running the risk of feeling, quote unquote, I don't know, Japanese guilt.
I really think it's important to like go into the full depth of like what your country has caused and like learn from that and accept responsibility to. Germany, like knowing all of the things that happened in Germany, they've taken responsibility for it, and I think that's like a huge thing.
Of course, we Germans are educated to feel more guilty. We cannot be proud of our history, but it's also something we have to accept. Our ancestors did those horrible things. Japanese people don't talk about that topic. You see the huge difference in the education of history, especially Second World War.
そのレポートの内容がドイツのアウシュビッツに対しての教育と日本のそういう中国とか韓国に対しての教育が違うみたいなこと書いたんですけど、でも確かに厳しすぎる。例えばヒトラーっていう言葉を発してはいけないとか、このポーズするのが法律で禁止されてるとか、それは確かにもうちょっと緩くで。
I think it's important not to go too much into being apologetic because this generation is different from the past generations. But I think that shouldn't hinder us from learning the entirety of what happened in history without fearing kids might dislike the country.
Japanese government just not ever bringing up those topics is very, very present still. And I completely understand why China and Korea are demanding of inclusion of Japanese war crimes in school history. If the children will be taught the topics, maybe they will grow up, they will become the politicians who will improve the cooperation between East Asian region, and it's more important than just not liking your country.
The government doesn't take a really strong approach in apologizing on behalf of the country. Maybe citizens of other countries feel the need to make Japanese citizens feel sorry. Rather than pointing their frustrations towards the government and officials, they point their frustrations towards citizens themselves.
Absolutely, we need to teach about it, we need to learn about it, but I feel like hating the people who are alive today for the sins of the past, I feel like that goes a little bit far.
I think it's understandable considering what Japan has done to China. It makes sense.
If Japan were to include more real history and what actually happened in the war and all of that, sentiments would change because I think then they're taking responsibility for it, and like Germany did.
The internet also is very accessible, so if they want to learn about the war crimes, they would have done it by themselves, I think. But I still think that school system should still offer talking about the war crimes that Japan has committed. Similarly, I think that it should be mandatory to learn about the Holocaust in America. So
I think it's important to let kids learn about it in not in a victim mindset, or not in we're so bad mindset.
I think it's important to make it as unbiased as possible.
I think it's almost impossible to be unbiased in history because someone has to write the textbook and winners write the history.
日本はただ歴史でこういうことがありましたしか教えてくれなくて、日本がかわいそうな目に遭っちゃったよっていう博物館が多いじゃないですか。もうちょっと話す機会があったらいいなと思います。そっちの方がより深まると思うので。
Memorizing the fact that the government wants. So it's very easy to get biased
So people who are interested in it have to do independent research.
I think textbooks often are very biased. Ideally, there would be some sort of standard internationally, some sort of way to like clear as much bias as possible. I would say only referencing scholarly sources. You know, history must be as unbiased as possible when being taught in schools. But with the internet, I also think it makes it even more difficult.
Difficult to be unbiased.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So what would you suggest?
I think giving more powers to teachers in creating their own curriculum, too strong of a government control over what's taught in schools, might be a main factor in why Japanese students might not know very much about war atrocities and war crimes.
What do you suggest?
I think it's important to learn about other countries' perspectives. So like showing other countries' textbooks, for example, might work.
Like translating.
Yes, or maybe first-hand information, such as like, well, in Germany you can use Anne Frank's.
It could be improved by adding more debates from like different perspectives from like different countries. Yeah.
If we teach history from a standpoint of only one country, that it's going to be not necessarily fair for all the people who suffered from Japanese war crimes.
The history between China and Japan, so big, so long, such a long history, that I feel like having a middle ground between teaching, like focusing entirely on it, but also teaching way more than just one page of the textbook, for sure.
As far as combating that, I think more cross-culture communication and being willing to have open conversations rather than kind of approaching it with your bias in mind. Especially in Japan, it might be uncommon practice for people to have open discussions about their opinions on politics or war crimes. It's a very heavy topic, but to have conversations with each other like this, it's a perfect way to solve these misunderstandings.
Especially now where a lot of governments are leaning a little bit more right-wing, when people don't remember what happened in the past and don't learn about it, it can repeat sometimes, and that would be very bad.
I think we need to teach younger generations how to learn from history. If you're hiding that from them, then they can't.
It's true that we have to move on at some point in history, but I think they should teach more thoroughly about what Japan did, because otherwise history will repeat itself.
Every country has a dark history at some point, and it's more important how you deal with it than just like not talk about it.